What happened to all the other rings of power? We know the fate of the infamous 20. Sauron's one, the 9 that turned men into wraiths, the 7 which exacerbated Dwarven avarice, and the 3 Elven Rings safe in the hands of the wise. But what about the others? The lesser rings, made as the essays to the craft, practice pieces for Celebrimbor's smiths as they learnt the art of ring making. Experimental prototypes, but still more than capable of corruption, that vanished into the shadows of Middle-earth. Where did they go? What powers did they hold? Did they have an unseen impact in the War of the Ring? Today we're talking about the mystery that even the most die-hard Tolkien fans can't stop wondering about, and to which nobody has the answers to. Let's get into the enigma of the lost Rings of Power. The story of the Rings of Power is one we know well. Sauron the Deceiver came to the elven smiths of Eregion disguised as a friend, as Anatar Lord of Gifts, teaching them the art of ring-making as a means to control their realms. The result? 20 legendary rings, which changed the fate of Middle-earth. But before these greater rings came into existence, there were others, lesser rings, created as practice pieces. To the elves, these rings were mere experiments. To mortals, dangerous weapons. Gandalf himself warned just that. These rings still held power, especially over mortals. We know that when Sauron was exposed, he sacked Eregion and took many of the rings, with only the 3 Elven Rings escaping his grasp. Did he take the lesser rings? What did he do with them then? Hints and stories from Tolkien's world suggest they didn't simply disappear. Let's explore the possibilities, starting with Saruman, one of Middle-earth's most infamous traitors. Saruman's obsession with power and the devices of power is well documented. His eventual downfall was partly due to his immense desire to rival Sauron and claim the One Ring for himself. But long before that, Saruman studied the lore of the Rings of Power, becoming an expert in their creation and use. When he captured Gandalf in Isengard, he even wore a ring of his own making, proclaiming himself Saruman the Ringmaker. One thing you should never do is take the White Wizard at his word. Did he really make this ring? Or is it one of the lesser rings gifted to him by Sauron in their early alliance, or stolen from one of the many realms that Saruman's Uruk-hai invaded? The lesser rings were not bound to Sauron in the same way the 9 and the 7 were. It's possible that Saruman found one and bent it to his will, which would go some way to explain his increasing arrogance and obsession with power. Traits we know are amplified by the influence of a ring of power. Saruman was no man, but even the wise and powerful feared their influence. Look at how Gandalf reacts when offered the ring by Frodo, and even more so Galadriel's close call in Lothlorien. Perhaps Saruman had not the steel to resist. And don't forget that Saruman was a lover of machinery, devices, forging and breeding. His experiments in Isengard lent themselves well to the creation of powerful tools, like a ring of power. Could he have tried to recreate or enhance the magic of these lesser rings? Could this have played a role in his final transformation into a darker, more ambitious figure? Saruman's eventual madness, his betrayal of the Free Peoples, and his lust for the One Ring could very well have been influenced by one of these ancient relics. Another clue lies in Saruman's search for the One Ring itself. His knowledge was vast, and he might have used a lesser ring as a tool to help him track down its greater counterpart. If true, it adds a tragic irony to Saruman's story. His search for the One Ring, driven by the power of a lesser ring, ultimately led to his downfall. Let's turn back the clock to Celebrimbor, the infamous elven smith who forged the 3 Elven Rings, and under Sauron's deceit helped craft the other rings of power. The lesser rings were his early creations, made as a prelude to the Great Rings. While we know the 3 were kept secret from Sauron and given to the wisest elves, and the others stolen, what of the lesser rings? Celebrimbor was not only a master craftsman, but also a ruler in his own right. It's possible that, like the 3 that he gifted to Gil-galad, Círdan, and Galadriel, he gifted some of the lesser rings to lesser lords, kings, or stewards. Elrond, for instance, was a trusted ally of Celebrimbor, and may have once received one of these lesser rings. While we know Elrond eventually wielded Vilya, one of the three, could he have also held a lesser ring in his early years? Dwarves too might have been recipients of these rings. As elves go, Celebrimbor was close with the dwarves. Did some of these lesser rings play a role in the slow decline of dwarf society? Did the dwindling presence, greater isolation, and growing mistrust of other races come from something more unnatural than just the stubbornness of dwarven nature? Or perhaps did these lesser rings go to Gondor? Could they explain the slow decline of the once great kingdom of men? We know that the infamous Third Age steward Denethor was weakened and corrupted by his Palantir. Was he, or stewards before him, also affected by one of these heirlooms of Eregion? Did some of these rings go east into the lands we know men were most corrupted? The Corsairs of Umbar, the Haradrim, these were corrupted men indeed. We know of the men who received the 9 rings, becoming the dreaded Nazgul, but Sauron had many other servants, including powerful orc captains like Azog, Bolg, and even the Great Goblin. These creatures commanded vast armies and were feared even among their own kind. How did they maintain such control in a world where betrayal and treachery were commonplace? It's possible that Sauron gifted some of the lesser rings to his most trusted orc leaders. These rings, while not as powerful as the 9, could have granted their wearers enough strength and authority to maintain their positions in brutal societies. We know that Sauron's ability to manipulate and corrupt was vast, so giving lesser rings to his orc commanders would have been a strategic move to keep them bound and loyal. These rings could have also played a role in the formation of Sauron's elite fighting forces. The Uruk-hai, perfected by Saruman, served Sauron as well. Could the chief Uruks have been influenced by these lesser rings, ensuring their obedience and ferocity on the battlefield? This would explain the orcs' unyielding loyalty to their masters, even in the face of certain death. There's also a darker possibility. What if the lesser rings corrupted these captains into complete mindless obedience, much like the 9 corrupted the kings of men? While we don't see orcs transformed into wraiths, it's conceivable that the lesser rings could have twisted their minds, making them more ruthless and brutal than before, filled with inane battle lust and unquestioning loyalty. Now let's journey eastward, to those mysterious lands of Rhûn and Harad. In Tolkien's world, these regions are shrouded in secrecy, with little known about their cultures or histories. However, we do know that Sauron had loyal followers in the east, men who fought for him during the War of the Ring. But could these men have been influenced by something more than just loyalty? The 2 blue wizards, Alatar and Palando, were sent to the east long before the events of The Lord of the Rings. Tolkien never fully explains what became of them, but some theories suggest that they might have fallen under the sway of dark magic. Could this magic have come from the rings? It's possible that the blue wizards encountered these rings during their travels, using them to gain power and influence over the eastern men. The lesser rings could have helped them build cults, turning them into powerful figures in the east. But like all rings of power, the lesser rings carry the risk of corruption. If the blue wizards did indeed wield these rings, it could explain why they never returned to the west. There's also the possibility that the leaders of Rhûn and Harad were given these rings by Sauron himself. These rings, though lesser in power, could have granted them control over their people, ensuring their loyalty to Sauron. The existence of such rings in the east would explain the men's willingness to march to war for Sauron, even as the tide turned against him in the west. So, what became of the lesser rings? Did Saruman use one to fuel his ambition? Were they gifts from Celebrimbor, slowly corrupting the rulers of Middle-earth? Did Sauron give them to his orc captains, ensuring their control over his armies? Or did they make their way east? Each one of these theories offers a glimpse into the fate of these mysterious rings. Which one do you believe? Or do you have your own theory? We want to hear it in the comments below. If you're fascinated by the hidden corners of Tolkien's world, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into Middle-earth's greatest mysteries. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.